He was never supposed to be famous. He wasn't discovered in a normal way, and he certainly wasn't built for a life under permanent public inspection. Yet somehow by the end of 2025, Yulong was no longer just a rising actor. He had become a full-scale mystery. A man with a private marriage, a new family, a quiet fortune, and a lifestyle so controlled it almost feels like a strategy. So here is the question everyone keeps circling back to as 2026 arrives. Is Yulong building a peaceful life? Or building a fortress? Stay with me because the details people overlook are the ones that matter most. Yulong's story is compelling because it begins with something most people recognize: an ordinary life that never asked to be extraordinary. He did not appear to pursue fame with the usual hunger. Instead, he seems to have stepped into visibility as if it were an accident. One moment, one photograph, one unexpected opening that became a permanent doorway. That is why audiences lean in. It feels less like a career plan and more like a turning point that could have happened to anyone. Yet the deeper truth is not that he rose quickly. It is that he rose before he had the emotional infrastructure to carry it. When success arrives faster than self-understanding, it can become a cage disguised as a crown. People interpret his restraint as a personality trait, but it may be a skill, learned under pressure, refined through necessity. Fame in this story is not celebration. It is surveillance. It asks for constant performance, constant clarity, constant explanation, even when a human being has none to offer. The biography that matters most, then, is not written in credits or headlines. It is written in choices. What he withholds, what he protects, what he refuses to turn into content. In 2026, the public may still talk about how he started. But the more meaningful question is how he continues. How someone remains intact when the world keeps trying to own the narrative of their life. This is the chapter where the story stops being about celebrity and becomes about survival through intimacy. A relationship that begins under professional pressure, whether staged, encouraged, or simply misunderstood, creates a complicated foundation. Yet what makes it emotionally gripping is the possibility that something genuine can still grow in an environment designed for appearances. It invites viewers to consider a difficult idea: that authenticity does not always begin cleanly, but it can still become real when people decide to stop performing. The notion of marriage and family being kept private is not merely a secret for drama. It is a boundary, and boundaries are often built when something matters enough to be protected. In a culture that treats public figures as public property, choosing privacy can be a form of love. It says, "This part of my life will not be negotiated by rumors, monetized by strangers, or turned into a scoreboard for internet debate." Then comes the emotional shift that changes everything: parenthood. A child is not just a life event. It is a moral mirror. It reorders priorities. It makes the future feel heavier and more sacred. In 2026, viewers respond to this because it touches a universal fear and hope: the desire to create a safe home inside a world that does not always feel safe. That is why this chapter is protected. It is not a storyline. It is a lifeline. Not all public pressure arrives as scandal. Some of it arrives as a slow, persistent erosion, whispers that never fully disappear, interpretations that become louder than facts, and the constant demand to clarify, a life that cannot be explained in a single statement. This is the modern form of drama. Not a headline that explodes, but a climate that never stops. In that climate, even silence becomes a message, and even normal human choices are treated as strategic moves. What makes Yulong's situation so watchable in 2026 is the way reputation pressure turns the audience into participants. Viewers do not simply observe, they interpret. They connect minor details. They build theories from patterns, coincidences, and body language. It becomes an ongoing puzzle, and the puzzle is addictive because it offers the illusion of certainty. If we analyze enough, we will know the truth. But real human lives do not unfold like tidy mysteries. They are messy, layered, and often contradictory. There is also something emotionally honest in the idea that a person might not fight every narrative. Choosing restraint can be maturity, not weakness. It can be a refusal to set fire to your own life just to keep strangers entertained. Yet that same restraint can be misunderstood as coldness, calculation, or hiding. That tension between self-protection and public suspicion is the engine of this drama. Ultimately, the story reveals more about culture than about one man. It shows how fame creates a second life. The one lived online where strangers vote on your intentions. A home is never just architecture. Especially for someone living under constant visibility, a home becomes a psychological device, a tool to control what the outside world cannot. In Yu Long's story, the house is described not as a place of display, but a place of defense. Minimalist, secure, inaccessible to cameras. That detail matters. It suggests that the most valuable thing he owns is not a luxury interior, but the ability to shut the door and remain himself. Minimalism in this context does not read as a trend. It reads as a coping strategy. When life is crowded with voices, people, obligations, and assumptions, the mind begins to crave space. Clean lines and quiet rooms can function like silence does. A reset. The idea of hidden entrances, restricted photography, and tightly controlled access feels less like arrogance and more like fatigue. A person does not build boundaries unless they have learned what happens when there are none. The public often asks, how expensive is it? But the deeper question is, what is it protecting? Perhaps it protects a marriage from becoming a performance. Perhaps it protects a child from becoming an image. Perhaps it protects a nervous system that has been overstimulated by years of attention. In that sense, the house becomes a symbol of maturity, a recognition that some parts of life must be kept ordinary, or they will not survive. In 2026, this resonates because many people, famous or not, understand the longing for a safe place. A boundary is not always a wall against others. Sometimes it is a promise to oneself. The most interesting part of Yu Long's lifestyle is not the money, the house, or the cars. It is the emotional posture beneath them. Discipline as identity and boundaries as a form of self-respect. In 2026, success is often defined by visibility, who is trending, who is loud, who can dominate the conversation. Yet his image, whether intentional or not, points towards something different. The idea that you can be powerful without being constantly available. Discipline is often misunderstood as coldness. But discipline can also be tenderness directed inward. A way of protecting the parts of yourself that the world would gladly consume. It shows in how he is described. Restrained, careful, almost deliberately unshowy. These choices imply a man who does not confuse attention with meaning. He may understand that fame is not stable, and that public approval is not love. What remains then is what you build privately. Character, routine, family, and a life that can still hold you when the cameras move on. This is a new kind of success story. Not the rise but the maintenance. Not the glamour but the endurance. The public is fascinated because this version of celebrity feels both aspirational and sad. It suggests that to survive at the top, you must become selective with your trust, your time, and even your emotions. If there is inspiration here, it is quiet but real. It is the reminder that boundaries are not a retreat, they are a blueprint. And in a world that constantly tries to extract more from you, choosing less can be the most courageous form of control.